Maya's alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 6 months. She rolled over in her tiny studio apartment, her body aching from yesterday's double shift. The cramped space barely fit her single bed, a small table, and a mini fridge that made strange humming noises all night. But it was all she could afford, especially with her mother's medical bills piling up like mountains of worry. She dragged herself to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. The mirror showed tired eyes with dark circles underneath, but Maya forced a smile anyway. Her mother always said that a smile could change everything, even on the hardest days. Today would be another test of that theory. The bus ride to Romano's restaurant took 45 minutes through the busy streets of Manhattan. Maya pressed her face against the window, watching people in expensive suits hurry past with their coffee cups and important phone calls. Sometimes she wondered what it would feel like to walk with that kind of confidence, to never worry about whether you could afford your next meal or your rent. Romano's was the kind of place where Maya would never eat as a customer. The smallest appetizer cost more than she spent on groceries in a week. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and every table was set with more forks and spoons than most people used in their entire kitchen. The lunch crowd was already forming when she arrived, and her manager Tony was pacing near the entrance like he always did when he was stressed. "Maya, thank goodness you're here," Tony said, rushing over with his clipboard. "We've got that big private dinner tonight in the Venetian room. Some billionaire CEO guy is bringing important business people from overseas. Everything has to be perfect." Maya nodded and tied her apron around her waist. She had been working at Romano's for 2 years, and she knew exactly what everything has to be perfect meant. No mistakes, no delays, and definitely no drawing attention to herself. Rich people didn't like to remember that the staff were actual human beings with real problems. The lunch shift passed in a blur of orders and running between tables. Maya's feet were already sore by 3 o'clock, but she couldn't slow down. Every tip mattered. Every dollar brought her a little closer to paying the electric bill that was overdue, or buying the special medicine that insurance wouldn't cover for her mother's treatment. During her break, Maya called the hospital to check on her mother. Elena had been admitted 3 days ago when the pain became too much to handle at home. The nurses were kind, but Maya could hear the concern in their voices when they talked about treatment options and costs. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" Maya asked, trying to keep her voice cheerful. "Better, mija," Elena replied, though her voice sounded weak and tired. "Don't worry about me. Are you eating enough? You work too hard." Maya smiled despite everything. Even lying in a hospital bed fighting cancer, her mother was still worrying about her daughter. "I'm fine, Mom. The doctor said your treatment is going well. That's all that matters." But as Maya hung up the phone, she couldn't stop thinking about the conversation she'd overheard between 2 doctors earlier that week. Words like experimental treatment and very expensive kept echoing in her mind. She shook her head and went back to work. There had to be a way to get the money. There just had to be. The dinner crowd at Romano's was always different from lunch. These people wore clothes that cost more than Maya's rent. They spoke in quiet voices about business, deals and stock markets, and vacations to places she'd only seen in movies. Maya moved between the tables like a ghost, refilling water glasses and taking orders while trying to become invisible. At 7 o'clock, Tony called her over to the service station near the kitchen. His face was red and sweaty, which meant he was really nervous about something. "Maya, I need you to handle the Venetian room tonight," he said, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. "It's Alexander Pierce from Pierce Industries, you know, the guy who owns half the buildings in this city. He's got some major international deal happening, and these people could make or break our reputation." Maya's stomach dropped. The Venetian room was Romano's most exclusive private dining space, reserved for only the most important customers. She had served there a few times before, but never for someone as wealthy and powerful as Alexander Pierce. One mistake could cost her the job, and she couldn't afford to lose this income. "Don't look so scared," Tony said, though he looked pretty scared himself. "Just do what you always do. Be polite, stay quiet, and don't mess up. They'll probably barely notice you're there anyway." Maya spent the next hour making sure everything in the Venetian room was absolutely perfect. She polished every glass twice and made sure each fork was placed exactly the right distance from the plates. The room looked like something from a fancy magazine with its dark wood panels and oil paintings of Italian countryside scenes. When Alexander Pierce arrived with his guests, Maya was struck by how different he seemed from what she expected. Most of the wealthy customers at Romano's acted like they owned the world and everyone in it. But Alexander was quieter, more thoughtful. He was probably in his early 40s, with graying hair and tired eyes that reminded her somehow of her own reflection in the morning. The business dinner progressed smoothly for the first 2 hours. Maya moved efficiently around the table, serving courses and refilling wine glasses while the men discussed international shipping routes and manufacturing costs. She tried not to listen too closely, but couldn't help overhearing numbers that made her head spin. They were talking about millions of dollars like she talked about grocery money. Everything was going perfectly until the moment that changed everything. Maya was serving the final course when exhaustion finally caught up with her. She hadn't eaten anything since her small breakfast 12 hours earlier, and the room felt suddenly warm and stuffy. As she reached across the table to refill Alexander's wine glass, her hand started to shake. The glass slipped from her fingers and red wine splashed across the white tablecloth, soaking into a stack of important-looking documents covered with charts and numbers. The entire table went silent. Maya felt her face burn with embarrassment as she stared at the spreading stain. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, grabbing napkins and trying desperately to clean up the mess. "I'm so sorry. Please don't—" "Hey, it's okay," Alexander said gently, standing up to help her. "Accidents happen. Are you all right?" "You look pale." Maya was so surprised by his kindness that she almost started crying right there. She expected him to be angry, to demand that Tony fire her immediately. Instead, he was asking if she was okay. When was the last time anyone had asked her that question? "I'm fine," she lied, still frantically dabbing at the wine stain. "I'll pay for the dry cleaning, I promise. And if the papers are ruined, the papers don't matter," Alexander said, gently taking the napkins from her trembling hands. "Seriously, don't worry about it. We can print more copies." As Alexander reached into his jacket pocket to get his wallet, probably to leave a tip, a small photograph fell out and fluttered to the floor. Maya bent down to pick it up, and her entire world stopped spinning. The photograph showed a young woman with long dark hair and a bright smile, wearing a flowing summer dress. She was standing in front of a small house with flowers blooming in the garden. The woman looked exactly like Maya's mother, but 25 years younger than Maya had ever seen her. Maya's hands shook as she held the photograph. Her mother had always been a mystery in some ways. Elena never talked about Maya's father or about her life before Maya was born. She always said the past was less important than the future they were building together. But here was proof that her mother had existed in a world Maya knew nothing about. A world where she wore expensive dresses and smiled like someone who had never known worry or fear. "Sir?" Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why is my mother's photograph in your wallet?" Alexander Pierce stared at the young woman holding his most precious photograph, and for the first time in 25 years, he felt like his carefully controlled world was falling apart. The business dinner, the important contracts, the millions of dollars at stake, none of it mattered anymore. All he could see was Elena's face looking back at him through her daughter's eyes. "Where did you get this?" Maya asked again, her voice stronger now but still shaking. The other men at the table were looking confused and uncomfortable, but Maya didn't care anymore. This was more important than any job, more important than anything. Alexander looked around the room at his business partners, then back at Maya. His face had gone completely pale, like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. "I think we need to talk," he said quietly. "But not here. Not now." "No," Maya said, surprising herself with her boldness. "I need to know right now. This is my mother. How do you have her picture?" One of the businessmen cleared. his throat. Alexander, perhaps we should reschedule this meeting. You seem to have some personal matters to attend to. Alexander nodded slowly, never taking his eyes off Maya. Yes, I think that would be best. My assistant will call you tomorrow to arrange a new time. The men gathered their papers and left, whispering among themselves about the strange turn the evening had taken. When they were alone, Alexander sat down heavily in his chair. He looked older suddenly, tired in a way that had nothing to do with business stress. Maya remained standing, still holding the photograph like it might disappear if she let go. Your mother's name is Elena Rodriguez, Alexander said finally, and 25 years ago I was completely in love with her. Maya felt her knees go weak. She sat down across from him, the photograph still clutched in her hands. That's impossible. My mother never mentioned knowing anyone like you. She never talked about my father at all. I'm not your father, Alexander said quickly, then paused. At least I don't think I am. Elena left me before I knew. He stopped and rubbed his face with his hands. This is complicated. Then uncomplicate it, Maya said, her voice getting stronger. Tell me what happened. Tell me why you carry around a picture of my mother. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the city lights. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and far away, like he was remembering a dream. Met Elena at a small cafe in Brooklyn. I was 26, just starting my first business with a partner. We had big dreams but no money. I was working 18-hour days, sleeping on my office couch, eating nothing but cheap pizza and coffee. Elena worked at the cafe, and every morning she'd make me this perfect cup of coffee and smile like I was the most important customer in the world. Maya tried to picture her mother as a young woman working in a cafe, but it was hard. Elena had always been careful, worried, protective. The idea of her being carefree and happy seemed impossible. We started talking, Alexander continued. First just small talk about the weather or the news, but then longer conversations about our dreams, our families, what we wanted from life. She was studying to be a teacher, working at the cafe to pay for school. She was the most beautiful, kind person I'd ever met. What happened? Maya asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. We fell in love, Alexander said simply. Real love. The kind you read about in books but never think will happen to you. After 6 months, I asked her to marry me. She said yes. We were planning this small wedding. Nothing fancy because we couldn't afford anything big. But we were happy. We were going to build a life together. Maya felt tears starting in her eyes. This wasn't the story she'd imagined about her mother's past. Elena had always seemed so alone, so careful never to let anyone too close. The idea that she'd once been engaged, planning a wedding, loving someone completely, it changed everything Maya thought she knew. Then what went wrong? Maya asked. Alexander's face darkened. My business partner got involved with some dangerous people. We needed money to keep the company going, and he borrowed from the wrong crowd. When we couldn't pay them back fast enough, they started making threats, not just against us, but against anyone we cared about. They threatened my mother. They threatened everyone in our lives. Elena started getting scary phone calls at work and at her apartment. Someone followed her home from school one night. These weren't people who made empty threats, Maya. They were serious about hurting anyone who mattered to us. Maya's hands were shaking as she listened. She thought about her mother's constant worry, the way Elena always looked over her shoulder when they walked down the street, how she never liked Maya to go anywhere alone after dark. Had Elena been carrying this fear for 25 years? One morning I went to the cafe where Elena worked and she wasn't there, Alexander continued. Her boss said she'd quit the day before without any explanation. I went to her apartment, but she was gone. All her things, everything, like she'd never existed. She just disappeared. She left me one note. It said she had to leave to protect someone she loved more than life itself. She said I would understand someday and that she was sorry. That was it. I never saw her again. Maya stared at the photograph in her hands. Her mother looked so young and happy in the picture, nothing like the worried, tired woman who had raised her. You've been carrying this picture for 25 years? It's the only one I have left of her. I hired private investigators, spent thousands of dollars trying to find her. But Elena Rodriguez had vanished completely. It was like she'd become a different person. And she had, Maya realized. Elena had become Elena Martinez, a single mother working 3 jobs to support her daughter. She'd never talked about the past because the past was too dangerous to remember. I built my company partly to honor her memory, Alexander said. Every success, every achievement. Part of it was hoping that somehow she'd hear about it and know that I'd made something of myself, that I'd become someone worthy of the love she'd given me. Maya felt overwhelmed by everything she was learning. Her mother had loved this man, had been ready to marry him, and then she'd given it all up to protect Maya, because Maya was the someone Elena loved more than life itself. Mr. Pierce, Maya said slowly. I think I need to tell you something about when my mother disappeared. Alexander looked at her with desperate hope in his eyes. 25 years ago, my mother was pregnant. She was pregnant with me. The silence that followed was so complete that Maya could hear her own heartbeat. Alexander stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time, taking in her dark hair, her eyes, the shape of her face. Are you saying, he began, but couldn't finish the sentence. I don't know, Maya said honestly. But the timing fits. And my mother never told me who my father was. She always said it was complicated, that someday when I was older she'd explain everything. Alexander stood up suddenly and walked to the window. His hands were shaking as he looked out at the city he'd helped build. All these years, he whispered. All these years I could have had a daughter. Maya didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to feel. Was this man her father? Was that why her mother had sacrificed everything, not just to protect herself, but to protect her unborn child from the dangerous world Alexander lived in? I need to see her, Alexander said, turning back to Maya. I need to talk to Elena. Where is she? Maya's throat tightened. She's in the hospital. She has cancer. Stage 3. The treatments are... She couldn't finish. The treatments were expensive, and Maya was running out of options to pay for them. Alexander's face went completely white. What hospital? What kind of cancer? What do the doctors say? The questions came so fast that Maya could barely keep up. But she could see something in Alexander's eyes that she recognized, the same desperate love and worry that she felt every time she thought about losing her mother. St. Mary's Hospital on the east side, Maya said. The doctors say there are newer treatments that might help, but insurance won't cover them. They're experimental and cost. She stopped. The amount was so large it seemed impossible to even say out loud. Money doesn't matter, Alexander said immediately. Whatever she needs, whatever the treatment costs, I'll take care of everything. Maya stood up, suddenly angry. We don't need your charity. We don't need you to swoop in and solve our problems with your money. This isn't charity, Alexander said quietly. If Elena is sick, if you're my daughter, then this is family, and family takes care of each other. Maya looked at this stranger who might be her father, holding the photograph of her mother when she was young and in love and full of hope. Everything she thought she knew about her life was changing, and she wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a terrible thing. But one thing was certain. Her mother had a lot of explaining to do. Maya barely slept that night. She lay in her small bed staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The photograph of her young mother sat on the nightstand next to her, proof that Elena had lived a completely different life before Maya was born. A life full of love and happiness that she'd given up for reasons Maya was only beginning to understand. The next morning, Maya called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Tony wasn't happy about it, but Maya didn't care. Some things were more important than serving expensive food to rich people. She needed answers, and the only person who could give them to her was lying in a hospital bed across town. The bus ride to St. Mary's Hospital felt like the longest journey of Maya's life. She kept thinking about Alexander's face when he realized she might be his daughter. The shock, the pain, the 25 years of wondering what had happened to the woman he loved. Maya had grown up without a father, but she'd never really thought about the possibility that somewhere out there, a man might be wondering about a daughter he'd never known existed. Elena was awake when Maya arrived, sitting up in bed and picking at her breakfast. The chemotherapy had made her hair thin and her skin pale, but her eyes were still bright and alert. She smiled when she saw Maya, the same warm smile that had gotten Maya through every difficult moment of her childhood. "Mija, you look tired," Elena said, patting the bed beside her. "Are you working too much again? I keep telling you, your health is more important than money." Maya sat down but didn't return her mother's smile. Instead, she pulled out the photograph and placed it on the white hospital blanket. Elena's face went completely still, like someone had pressed a pause button on her life. "Where did you get this?" Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. "From Alexander Pierce," Maya said, watching her mother's reaction carefully. "He's been carrying it in his wallet for 25 years, Mom. 25 years of wondering what happened to you." Elena closed her eyes and leaned back against her pillows. For a moment, Maya thought she might pretend not to know what she was talking about. But when Elena opened her eyes again, they were filled with tears. "I hoped you would never have to know about this," Elena said softly. "I tried so hard to keep that part of my life separate from yours." "Why?" Maya asked, though part of her already knew the answer would break her heart. "Why did you give up someone you loved? Why did you raise me alone when I could have had a father?" Elena was quiet for a long time, looking at the photograph like it showed a different person entirely. When she finally spoke, her voice was filled with a sadness that Maya had never heard before. "I was 22 when I met Alexander," Elena began. "I thought I knew everything about life, but I was just a girl with big dreams and no idea how cruel the world could be. Alexander was different from other boys I'd dated. He was ambitious but not selfish. He worked harder than anyone I knew. But he still found time to bring me flowers from the corner market." Maya tried to imagine her mother as a young woman in love, but it was difficult. Elena had always been so careful, so protective, so focused on survival rather than romance. "We were planning our wedding for the spring," Elena continued. "Nothing fancy, just a small ceremony with our families and friends. Alexander's business was starting to grow, and I was going to finish my teaching degree. We had this little apartment picked out with a view of the park. Everything seemed perfect." "What changed?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew part of the answer. Elena's face darkened. "Alexander's business partner, David, made some very bad choices. He borrowed money from dangerous people to keep their company running. When they couldn't pay it back fast enough, these people started making threats." Maya remembered what Alexander had told her about the threats, but she wanted to hear her mother's side of the story. "At first it was just phone calls," Elena said. "Someone would call the cafe where I worked and ask questions about me. What time I got off work, where I lived, whether I had family in the city. I thought it was strange, but Alexander said not to worry about it. But it got worse? Much worse. Someone started following me home from school. They would sit in a car outside my apartment building for hours, just watching. One night I found a note under my door that said they knew exactly where I was at all times, and that I should be more careful about my safety." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't imagine living with that kind of fear, never knowing if someone dangerous was watching her every move. "Alexander wanted to go to the police," Elena continued. "But David said that would make things worse. These weren't ordinary criminals, Mija. They had connections, people in high places who helped them avoid consequences. Going to the police might have just made them angrier." "So what did you do?" Elena looked down at her hands, twisted together on top of the blanket. "I found out I was pregnant with you, and suddenly, everything changed. It wasn't just about my safety anymore. I had to think about protecting my baby." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had always wondered about the timing of her birth, but her mother had always been vague about the details. "The same week I discovered I was pregnant, things got much worse," Elena said. "Someone broke into my apartment while I was at work. They didn't steal anything, but they left everything torn apart, like they were looking for something. And they left another note that said, 'Next time, I might not be so lucky to come home to just a mess.' You must have been terrified." "I was beyond terrified, but more than that, I was determined. I realized that as long as I was connected to Alexander, You would never be safe. These people were using me to get to him, and now they could use both of us. I couldn't let that happen to my child. Maya felt tears starting in her eyes. She was beginning to understand the impossible choice her mother had faced. Stay with the man she loved and risk their child's safety, or disappear completely to protect the baby she was carrying. I spent 3 days planning how to leave, Elena said. I opened a new bank account under my maiden name, Martinez instead of Rodriguez. I found a small apartment in a different part of the city where nobody knew me. And I wrote the hardest letter I've ever had to write. The letter you left for Alexander. I told him I had to leave to protect someone I loved more than life itself. I couldn't tell him about you, Maya, because if he knew he had a child, he would have moved heaven and earth to find us, and that would have put all 3 of us in danger. Maya finally understood why her mother had always been so careful, so protective, so reluctant to trust new people or get too comfortable anywhere. She hadn't just been raising a daughter. She'd been hiding from a past that could have destroyed them both. Did the dangerous people ever find you? For the first few years, I was always looking over my shoulder, Elena admitted. Every unexpected phone call, every stranger who looked at us too long, every time someone knocked on the door, I thought they had found us. But Alexander's business partner eventually paid back what he owed, and the threats stopped. By then, though, I had built a new life. You were growing up healthy and safe, and I couldn't risk changing that. But what about Alexander? Didn't you ever want to contact him again? Elena picked up the photograph and traced her finger along the edge. Every single day for 25 years, I've thought about Alexander. I've followed his success in the newspapers and on television. I was so proud of what he accomplished, but also so sad that I couldn't share it with him. He spent 25 years looking for you, Mom. He hired private investigators. He never forgot you. I know, Elena whispered. I saw the investigators asking questions around the old neighborhood a few times. I was terrified they would find us, but also part of me hoped they would. I wanted so badly to see Alexander again, to tell him about you, to explain why I had to leave. Why didn't you ever reach out, especially after the danger was over? Elena was quiet for so long that Maya thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was filled with regret and pain. Because by then, I was ashamed. Alexander had become this successful, powerful man, and I was just a single mother working multiple jobs to pay rent. I convinced myself that he was better off without us, that he had probably moved on and found someone else. I thought contacting him would just disrupt the good life he had built. Maya reached over and took her mother's hand. It felt small and fragile, nothing like the strong hands that had worked so hard to take care of her all these years. Mom, he never moved on. He never married anyone else. He's been carrying your picture in his wallet for 25 years, waiting for you to come back. Elena started crying then, deep sobs that shook her whole body. Maya had rarely seen her mother cry, and it broke her heart to see how much pain Elena had been carrying all these years. I was so young and so scared, Elena said through her tears. I thought I was protecting everyone by staying away, but maybe I was just protecting myself from having to face the mess I had made of everything. You didn't make a mess of anything, Maya said firmly. You made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. You kept me safe. You raised me to be strong and independent. You sacrificed your own happiness to give me a good life. But you grew up without a father. The reunion between Alexander and Elena happened 3 days later, and Maya wasn't sure if she was ready to witness it. She had called Alexander the morning after her conversation with her mother, and his voice had broken when she confirmed that Elena wanted to see him. 25 years of wondering, hoping, and grieving were about to come to an end. Maya arrived at the hospital early that morning to prepare her mother. Elena had asked the nurses to help her wash her hair and put on a little makeup, though the chemotherapy had left her looking fragile and tired. She kept touching her thin hair nervously and asking Maya if she looked okay. Mom, you look beautiful, Maya said, and she meant it. Despite the illness, despite the years of worry and hard work, Elena still had the same gentle smile and kind eyes that showed in the old photograph. "I'm scared, Mija," Elena admitted. "What if he takes one look at me and realizes that the woman he loved doesn't exist anymore? What if too much time has passed?" Before Maya could answer, there was a gentle knock on the door. Alexander stood in the doorway holding a small bouquet of flowers from the hospital gift shop. He looked just as nervous as Elena, like a teenager, on his first date rather than a billionaire CEO who commanded boardrooms full of powerful people. "Hello, Elena," he said softly. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Hello, Alexander." Maya had planned to stay for the reunion, but suddenly it felt too private, too personal for anyone else to witness. "I'm going to get some coffee," she said, squeezing her mother's hand. "I'll be back in a little while." She left them alone and spent the next hour walking the hospital corridors, trying to process everything that was happening. In the span of a week, she had discovered that her mother had lived a completely different life, that she had a father who was one of the richest men in the city, and that her entire understanding of her family was wrong. When Maya returned to the room, Alexander and Elena were sitting close together, talking quietly. Elena was holding the flowers, and both of them had been crying. But they were also smiling, and Maya could see something in her mother's face that she had never seen before, pure happiness. "How are you both doing?" Maya asked carefully. "We have a lot to figure out," Alexander said, standing up to face his daughter. The word felt strange even thinking it. His daughter. Maya had spent 24 years not knowing her father, and Alexander had spent 25 years not knowing he had a child. "Your mother has been telling me about your childhood," Alexander continued, "about how hard you both worked, how you took care of each other. I'm so proud of the woman you've become, Maya, but I'm also angry that I missed all of it." Maya could hear the pain in his voice. "It's not anyone's fault. Mom did what she thought was best. I know that. But it doesn't make it hurt less. I missed your first steps, your first words, your first day of school. I missed teaching you to ride a bike and helping you with homework and scaring away boys who wanted to date you." Maya smiled despite everything. Mom handled the boy scaring pretty well on her own. She was very protective. "I have 24 years of being a father to make up for," Alexander said. "And I want to start by taking care of your mother's medical bills. The experimental treatment she needs. I've already spoken to the doctors about it." Maya's smile faded. "We didn't ask you to do that. I know you didn't ask. But Elena is the mother of my child and the woman I never stopped loving. Taking care of her isn't charity, Maya. It's what I should have been doing all along if I had known where you both were. You can't just throw money at us and expect that to make up for 24 years, Maya said, her voice getting sharper. We've been fine on our own. We don't need you to swoop in and solve all our problems." Alexander looked hurt by her words, but Elena spoke up from the bed. "Maya, don't be so hard on him. He's trying to help." "But that's just it," Maya said, turning to face both of them. "He's trying to help with money because that's what he knows how to do. But money can't buy back lost time. Money can't make us a family just because he writes a check." The room got very quiet. Maya could see that her words had stung Alexander, but she couldn't help feeling angry. For 24 years, she and her mother had struggled and worked and worried about every dollar. Now suddenly this stranger wanted to fix everything with his wealth, like their years of hardship had just been a problem waiting for the right solution. "You're right," Alexander said finally. "Money can't buy back time or make us a family, but it can give your mother the best possible chance to beat this cancer, and it can give you opportunities that you've never had before. Isn't that worth something?" "What kind of opportunities?" Maya asked suspiciously. "College, for one thing. Elena told me you had to drop out to work and pay for her treatments. You could go back, study whatever you want without worrying about tuition or living expenses." Maya had dreamed of finishing college, but hearing Alexander offer to pay for it made her feel uncomfortable. "I can pay for my own education." "How?" Alexander asked, not unkindly. "You're working double shifts at a restaurant just to pay rent and medical bills. When exactly are you going to have time to go to school, let alone money for tuition?" Maya didn't have a good answer for that, which made her even more frustrated. She had always prided herself on being independent, on taking care of herself, and her mother without anyone's help. The idea of accepting Alexander's money felt like admitting that she wasn't strong enough to handle her own life. Over the next few weeks, Alexander visited the hospital every day. He would bring Elena flowers or books or just sit and talk with her about their old life together and the years they had lost. Maya watched their relationship slowly rebuild itself, and she could see how happy it made her mother. But Maya herself struggled with having Alexander in their lives. He was kind and patient, always asking about her work and her dreams. He never pushed too hard or demanded more time and attention than she was willing to give. But his presence changed everything about their small, carefully controlled world. One evening, Maya came home from work to find Alexander waiting outside her apartment building. He looked out of place in the rundown neighborhood like an expensive car parked among old bicycles. "What are you doing here?" Maya asked. "I wanted to see where you live," Alexander said. "I wanted to understand your life better." Maya felt embarrassed about her tiny studio apartment with its noisy heater and thin walls and furniture from thrift stores. "It's not much, but it's home. Elena raised an amazing daughter in spite of very difficult circumstances," Alexander said as they walked up the narrow stairs. "That tells me everything I need to know about both of you." Inside the apartment, Alexander looked around at Maya's small but tidy space. He saw the stack of medical bills on her table, the photo of Elena on her nightstand, the book she had kept from her unfinished college courses. "Maya, can I ask you something?" Alexander said, sitting down in her one chair while she sat on the bed. "Sure. Why are you so angry with me? I know I wasn't there for your childhood, but that wasn't my choice. If I had known about you, I would have moved heaven and earth to be part of your life." Maya was quiet for a moment, trying to put her feelings into words. "I'm not really angry with you," she said finally. "I'm angry with the situation. For 24 years, it was just me and Mom against the world. We took care of each other. We solved our own problems. We might not have had much money, but we had each other, and that was enough. And now suddenly there's this whole other life we could have had. A life with money and security and opportunities. And part of me wonders if all our struggling was for nothing. If Mom had just been brave enough to contact you years ago, we could have had everything we needed." Alexander nodded slowly. "But if your mother had contacted me years ago, would you be the same person you are today?" Maya looked surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, would you have learned to work as hard as you do? Would you be as independent and strong? Would you care as much about people who are struggling because you've been there yourself?" Maya had never thought about it that way. "I don't know. I've met a lot of wealthy people's children, Maya. Most of them are spoiled and entitled and have never worked a day in their lives. They think the world owes them everything because they were born lucky. You're not like that. You understand the value of hard work and taking care of people you love. That's not something money can teach. But it still doesn't feel fair," Maya said. "Why should some people be born with everything while others have to fight for every opportunity?" "It's not fair," Alexander agreed. "But that doesn't mean we can't try to balance the scales a little bit. Your mother's cancer treatment, your education, a chance for both of you to worry less about money and more about building the relationship we've all missed out on. These aren't handouts, Maya. They're a father trying to take care of his family." Maya felt tears starting in her eyes. She had been so focused on maintaining her independence that she hadn't really thought about what Alexander was going through. He had just discovered he had a grown daughter who didn't need him, didn't want his help, and had managed perfectly well without him for 24 years. "I'm scared," Maya admitted. "I'm scared that if I let you help us, I'll lose the person I've worked so hard to become." 3 months later, Elena's experimental treatment was working better than anyone had dared to hope. The cancer markers in her blood were dropping, and she had more energy than she'd had in over a year. But everyone knew that cancer was unpredictable, and the doctors warned them not to celebrate too early. Elena had good days and bad days, and Maya learned to treasure every moment when her mother felt strong enough to laugh and make plans for the future. On one of Elena's better days, she asked Maya and Alexander to meet her in the hospital garden. It was a small space behind the medical center with benches and flower beds that patients and families could use when they needed fresh air and sunshine. Elena was sitting on a bench wearing a colorful headscarf, looking more like her old self than she had in months. "I have something important to talk to you both about," Elena said when they sat down beside her. Maya felt her stomach tighten with worry. Was the treatment not working as well as the doctors thought? Had the cancer spread? She reached over and took her mother's hand, surprised by how much stronger it felt than it had a few months ago. "Don't look so scared, Mika," Elena said with a soft smile. "It's good news, I think. The doctors say I'm responding so well to the treatment that I might be able to go home soon. Really home, not just for a few hours here and there." Maya felt relief wash over her like a warm wave. "Mom, that's wonderful news. When? How soon?" "Maybe next week, if my blood work continues to improve. But that's not all I wanted to tell you." Elena looked back and forth between Maya and Alexander, and Maya could see something serious in her mother's expression. "What is it?" Alexander asked gently. "I've been thinking a lot about time," Elena said. "About how much time I wasted being scared. How much time we all lost because of choices I made 25 years ago. If this cancer has taught me anything, it's that we don't know how much time we have, and I don't want to waste another day." Maya squeezed her mother's hand. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying that I want us to be a real family. Not just three people who share DNA and difficult history. A real family who spends time together and takes care of each other and builds new memories to replace all the ones we missed." Alexander cleared his throat, and Maya could see that he was trying not to cry. "Elena, I want that more than anything. But Maya needs to be comfortable with it too. This is all new for her." Maya looked at her mother, who had sacrificed so much to keep her safe, and at Alexander, who had spent 25 years carrying a photograph and wondering about a love that disappeared. In the past 3 months, she had watched them slowly rediscover each other, sharing stories and inside jokes and the kind of comfortable silence that only comes from deep connection. And she had also watched Alexander try to be a father to her. He never pushed too hard or expected too much. He came to her college graduation ceremony when she finally finished her degree with his financial help. He celebrated when she got a new job at a nonprofit organization that helped low-income families. He listened when she talked about her dreams and worries, and he offered advice only when she asked for it. "I think I'd like that too," Maya said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "Being a real family, I mean." Elena's face lit up with joy. "Really? You're sure?" "I'm sure. But I have one request." "Anything," Alexander said immediately. "I want us to start fresh. Not trying to make up for lost time or fix the past, but just being who we are now and building something new together." Elena nodded enthusiastically. "That sounds perfect. We can create our own traditions, our own way of being a family." "Speaking of traditions," Alexander said, reaching into his jacket pocket, "I have something for both of you." He pulled out 2 small jewelry boxes. Maya opened hers to find a simple gold necklace with a small pendant shaped like a heart. Elena's box contained a similar necklace, but with a pendant shaped like a star. "The heart is for Maya, because you have the biggest heart of anyone I know," Alexander explained. "You work so hard to take care of everyone around you, and you've never let difficult circumstances make you bitter or selfish." Maya touched the pendant gently. It was beautiful, but more than that, it felt meaningful. Alexander had thought about who she was as a person, not just what she might want as a gift. "And the star is for Elena," Alexander continued, "because you've been my guiding star for 25 years. Even when I couldn't find you, the memory of your love helped me become a better person." Elena was crying openly now, happy tears that seemed to wash away years of regret and longing. "Alexander, it's beautiful, thank you." "There's one more thing," Alexander said, pulling out a 3rd necklace. This one had a pendant shaped like an anchor. "This one is for me, because you two are my anchor now. You keep me grounded and remind me what's really important in life." Maya felt tears starting in her own eyes. For so long she had thought of Alexander as this powerful, distant figure, who lived in a world she could never understand. But sitting here in the hospital garden, giving them jewelry he had carefully chosen, he just seemed like a man who loved his family and wanted to belong somewhere. The next week, Elena was discharged from the hospital with strict instructions to rest and take her medications and come back for regular checkups. Alexander had offered to hire a nurse or move Elena into his penthouse apartment, but she insisted on going back to her own small place. She wanted to feel normal again, she said, not like a patient or a charity case. Maya had moved back in with her mother temporarily to help with her recovery, and Alexander visited them almost every day. Sometimes he brought groceries or cooked dinner. Sometimes he just sat and talked with Elena about their old life together, or helped Maya with her new job applications. Sometimes the three of them watched movies together on Elena's small television, arguing about what to order for takeout and falling asleep on the couch like families do. 6 months after Elena came home from the hospital, Alexander made an unexpected announcement. He had sold his penthouse apartment and bought a house in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from where Elena and Maya lived. "Why would you do that?" Maya asked when he told them about the house. "Your apartment was beautiful." "My apartment was big and expensive and empty," Alexander said. "I don't need a place to impress business partners anymore. I need a place where my family feels comfortable visiting, where Elena can have a garden if she wants one, where we can have barbecues, in the backyard and room for grandchildren someday." Maya blushed at the mention of grandchildren, but Elena clapped her hands together with delight. "A garden sounds wonderful. I haven't had space to grow flowers in 25 years. "There's something else," Alexander said, looking nervous again. "I was hoping you might both consider moving in with me. Not because you need my help, but because I need yours. I've lived alone for 25 years and I'm tired of it. I want to come home to people I love. I want to help Elena with her recovery and get to know Maya better. And maybe we can figure out how to be the family we were meant to be before life got complicated." Maya looked at her mother, who was practically glowing with happiness. Elena had always been independent, always insisted on taking care of herself. But Maya could see that the idea of not facing cancer recovery alone, of having Alexander's support and companionship, appealed to her more than she was willing to admit. "What do you think, Mija?" Elena asked. It would be nice to have more space and Alexander could use the company. Maya thought about it carefully. She had finally gotten comfortable with accepting Alexander's help with her education and her mother's medical bills. Could she take the next step and actually live with him, be part of a real family unit? "I have conditions," Maya said, which made both Alexander and Elena laugh. "Of course you do," Alexander said fondly. "What are they?" "This time, I want to pay rent even if it's just a small amount. I want to help with cooking and cleaning and household responsibilities. And I want my own space where I can have privacy when I need it." "Those conditions are more than fair," Alexander said. "Actually, they're exactly what I was hoping for. I don't want you to be my guest, Maya. I want you to be my daughter coming home to your family." 3 weeks later, they moved into Alexander's new house together. It was smaller than his old penthouse, but infinitely warmer, with big windows and a kitchen designed for cooking together, and a backyard where Elena immediately started planning her flower garden. Maya had her own room with a desk where she could study and apply for graduate school programs. Elena had a bright, comfortable room with a reading chair and space for all her books, and Alexander had a study where he could work from home more often, spending less time at the office and more time with his family. The first few months weren't always easy. 3 adults who had lived alone for years had to learn how to share space and make decisions together. Alexander had to learn that he couldn't solve every problem by throwing money at it. Elena had to learn that accepting help didn't make her weak. And Maya had to learn that loving someone didn't mean losing her independence. But slowly, they developed routines and traditions that felt natural. Elena cooked breakfast every morning for whoever was home. Alexander taught Maya about business and investing, skills that would help her in her nonprofit work.